Part one. One of my earliest memories is of my sisters and me dancing around the dining room of the house I grew up in. The music was provided by my dad at the piano. He played by ear, and the tunes were made up. If he played low and slow, we were plodding, dancing elephants. If he played high and fast, we were birds flitting around on our tiptoes. The game was to see how fast we could switch when the music changed. As we got older, all three of us kids had music lessons, but it was never clear to me how Dad had learned to play. I do recall that his mother played a little. When she visited us, Grandma would sometimes sit at that dining room piano and plunk out Methodist hymns. According to family legend, she had once had a job in a theater accompanying silent movies. Another early memory is of listening to the radio on Sunday mornings. The show was called Invitation to Beauty and featured light classics like Strauss waltzes. Dad was a radio announcer for over 50 years, and he selected all the music for that show. Because it was pre-recorded, we had the experience of hearing Dad's voice coming over the radio while he was there in the room with us making French toast or reading the Sunday paper. Music in our household was always more than entertainment. It was a chance to listen to each other and to participate in family life. There are photos of the family relaxing on the deck of our lake cottage. Dad, in shorts and shirtless, is at a keyboard. I have a guitar, and my dad's older brother is playing the saxophone. Church was also a family event, and when we stood in the pews to sing hymns, even though most of the congregation sang in unison, Dad would try to fill in the bass part. In more recent years, I've had the joy of connecting with friends and work colleagues by playing music. When we discovered that a NASA postdoc that I'd hired was also a guitarist, he quickly joined my motley rock and roll band. And when my dad was in town, he'd sit in with the band too. Our 30-ish drummer and my 70-ish dad got along just fine. We laughed a lot. Many years later, when Dad needed full-time nursing care due to dementia, piano guitar duets were still a common feature of my visits. After one marathon 2-hour set of big band standards and show tunes, Dad stood up from the piano bench, stretched his back, and announced, "I didn't know I could still do that." That may have been the last time he did. Maybe a year later, we had to place him in hospice care. That week, my sister arranged a family meal in the common room of the nursing home. It was December, and we sang some Christmas carols. Of course, Dad sang bass. Part two. In my family, music played an important part in bringing us together and providing joy. But what about in a religious group? Why do we sing? One answer is tradition. The form and outline of our Sunday services is traditional, even if the content is not. Our order of service is recognizable to somebody like me who grew up in the Methodist Church. Prayers, readings, sermons tend to alternate with music. This gives a break from the torrent of words, but also, when it's done well, enhances the message. The Reverend Jason Shelton, who helped compile our Teal hymnal, and who, not so incidentally, wrote Answering the Call of Love. Jason Shelton points out that our hymnal may be the closest thing we UUs have to sacred scripture. A lot of thought goes into making sure our hymns reflect our theology. You may know that the Unitarians and the Universalists jointly prepared a hymn book in 1937. I'll remind you that formal consolidation didn't happen until 1961, 24 years later. The hymnal compilers decided it was important to show our common theological threads. So singing is part of our living tradition. That's even the name of the hymnal, right? And new hymn books tend to arise when we have new things to say. I'd like to turn next to another facet of music in our services, and that's the process of singing together. Aside from the joining of hands for the benediction, congregational singing is probably the most participatory part of worship. Monica Gomery, a Venezuelan Jewish rabbi and poet now living in Philadelphia, puts it this way: singing in community encourages us to listen to one another, to blend our voices, to build something collaborative. Zoom meetings, unfortunately, are a poor substitute for actually blending our voices, but I have been heartened to see people on my computer screen singing along, even if our mics are muted. This brings me to another function of singing: encouragement. During the 1950s Montgomery bus boycott, Baptist and Methodist hymns and spirituals buoyed people's spirits. In the 1960s, young activists wrote new words to folk songs. They gave, said Reverend Martin Luther King, a sense of unity. More recent protests, like the Occupy movement, seem to lack that source of unity. Issei Barnwell, who in the 1970s started the Jubilee Singers at DC's All Souls Unitarian Church, thinks that lack of unity is because nothing on the radio is in groups. Even in Baptist and Methodist churches, she says, soloists have taken over. So in response to that, Barnwell, who now 74, travels the country to teach the oral tradition of group singing. We have one more hymn coming up, and I'm going to encourage you to sing along. And don't be shy. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, published a list of directions for singing. He was writing in 1761, just a few years before John Murray brought Universalism to the US. Here's his advice: join with the congregation as frequently as you can. Sing lustily and with good courage. So I've talked of church music as a repository for our theology, as a builder of community, and as a source of strength. One more thing needs saying, I think. Part of the power of song is precisely that it's more than words. There are times when words fail us, when we're sad or scared or angry and need, I don't know, something. Our closing hymn is that sort of prayer. In our hymnal, the words go like this: over my head, I hear singing in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Maybe God language isn't helpful to you, but perhaps like me, you can connect to that sense of longing. Perhaps like mine, your heart aches for something much closer to heaven. So in the version of the hymn that we're going to hear next, the words go, "Up above my head, I feel trouble in the air. And in spite of that, I believe there's a heaven somewhere."